And you know when people say they heard a voice, and it always sounds like, yeah, but I actually feel like I heard a voice. I feel like I was so exhausted. There were a couple of challenges at the time, and I remember hearing a voice saying, just quit.
You must have learnt a huge deal in such a short space of time.
Yeah.
On a Hollywood blockbuster, and it is iconic, that film. Especially for Dubai.
30% of the people out there will love you. 30% of the people out there will hate you, and 30% are indifferent, or they're neutral. And the minute I learned that, I felt liberated.
Welcome back to the ChefJKP Podcast. And on the show today, I have the absolute honour of having Reim El Houni. Not only is she a TV and media consultant, she's a keynote speaker, executive television producer, and the CEO, no less, of TI22 Films. Reem, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you walk around and just announce me like that everywhere I go? That was I love the gravitas. Thank you very much.
So, first things first, childhood food memories. Can you tell me all about them, please?
So, I'm originally from Libya, and my mum is an awesome chef. She doesn't know it. She wouldn't call herself a chef, but she is. And so all of my childhood memories are very, we used to have Libyan meals for lunch, dinner, and that's what my mum cooked, which is very difficult to replicate and find now.
Tell me all about it, because I have no clue about Libyan food, so I want to know.
So I think people, obviously Libya is in North Africa, so people assume that, it must be very Mediterranean, which it is. There are, some Mediterranean-inspired dishes. But what people don't realize is that we're very carb-heavy. And I don't know if it was also the Italian influence, because Italy, was in that part of the world for a long time, specifically in Libya for a long time. So pasta is a big thing. So we used to have pasta every day. That was a thing, with bread. You do not have a meal without bread.
So pasta with bread.
Yeah.
Okay. But then would you have sort of North African spices in the mix there?
Very spicy. So you're probably familiar. I know you're familiar, but your audience is probably familiar with harissa and sort of like chili pepper. And so everything, every meal there would be harissa has to be on the table. So always chili all the time. And what I found extra interesting is we used to go back to Libya for summer, and there was a brief period of time where I attempted to live in Libya, which was fascinating. But tuna is another big thing. So you'd have tuna sandwiches. If you're hungry, tuna sandwich with harissa. That's the thing that all Libyans would have grown up eating. So it's just interesting. And also the other thing which changed when I was in Libya was this whole idea of a massive lunch and barely any dinner, minimalistic dinner. So dinner was, you're really hungry, have a tuna sandwich, otherwise boil an egg or have some melon. Which actually is a much healthier way of living. So at the start, I was like, what do you mean there's no dinner? And then eventually you're like, actually, I feel, it works. And as a result, I was much healthier during my time there.
So then, as you were growing up through your adolescent years, what were the sort of types of food that you were having? Was it sort of Libyan or British? What did you sort of lean towards?
It was kind of a bit of a mix, because I grew up in London, so very British, obviously inspired palate. So anything from a baked potato would be staple diet on a daily basis. But at home, our meals were predominantly Libyan meals. So and that could be, we have a Libyan soup, which is tomato based with meat and grains. So we had that fairly regularly. And again, as I mentioned, the pasta dishes were quite prominent, but couscous as well. It's got a slightly different seasoning, and ours, I believe, is with vegetables compared to the Moroccan one, which is more with kind of more meats-based. But it's, so very Libyan dishes.
But it sounds quite interesting, though, because the British palate is not really honed to spices, I would say.
Yeah.
So it would have been quite interesting for you to sort of go from the spicy, sort of beautiful harissa, all that sort of thing, to then go to a quite plain food, right?
Which is quite funny because I've got such a eclectic mix of friends, and when we go out for a meal, everyone's like, "Oh, it's going to be really spicy," and I'm like, "Oh, you weaklings!" It's like we live by spice, and actually now I have so many Asian and Indian friends, and they're like, "Oh, you're not going to be able to handle the spice," and I'm like, "Try me," So it's
move over.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, during your educational path, what did you do sort of after college?
In terms of education, my career.
Yes.
So I was incredibly lucky that I knew exactly what I was passionate about from a very young age. I used to watch way too much TV and knew that was something that excited me. So I had my very first internship when I was 16 years old at NBC when they used to be based in London.
Oh, wow.
And that for me was the experience that just had light bulbs going off in my head. I remember it was the very first time that I was in a studio gallery. And when you're there live, and imagine you're a TV fan and now you're seeing things behind the curtain and seeing how it operates. And I just remember standing there and going, I could do this for a living. I could literally, this passion I have, I know I watch a lot of content, but now I can actually create it and this can become my career. So it was almost like a switch that went off in my head at the age of 16 where I was like, this is what I'm going to do forever. And every single thing I've done from that point has been very obsessive and very persistent to ensure that I get the next opportunity and the next opportunity. So I've had a very clear path because I really am passionate about my industry.
So for those people who don't know about the media or television industry, what is that path? So you're 16, you do your apprenticeship. Where next after you sort of qualify?
So I did study media at university. I specialized in television. But what I would actually say is I learned more from my work experiences and my internships and my persistence in those opportunities. So to give you an example, and yes, this is going to show my age, but I used to record shows on VHS tape, and I would play them back and I'd write down all the names in the credits of the people on the show. And then I knew, for example, at the BBC, it was first name dot surname at bbc.co.uk. And I would just blanket email everybody, hi, I'm looking for an opportunity. Hi, I'm looking for an opportunity. And it paid off. And I ended up for people from the UK, they'll be familiar with a BBC show called Watchdog, which was very popular.
Huge.
Yep.
Huge.
And I ended up having like an internship at Watchdog, which was amazing. So for me to suddenly be in there with my BBC pass, and I remember so clearly my last day at Watchdog, my last day holding this pass, and I was like, I don't want to leave this building. How do I stay in this building? So again, I remember stepping out at lunch and literally going department to department to department, knocking on the door, going, hi, I'm an intern. It's my last day on Watchdog, so I'm available. And, one department like, oh, great, good for you. Next department like, can't help you. Next department, sorry, nothing for you. And by the time I got to the 7th department, which was BBC Education, they said, can you research? And I was like, yep, I can research. And like, well, we're starting a new series on BBC Education. We need a researcher. I'm like, I can do it. And so I started as a researcher with BBC Education whilst I was at university. So whilst I was at university, I had 2 days a week at uni.
Right.
And 3 days a week, I was a researcher for a BBC Education series.
So for those people who don't know, what was the responsibility of the researcher specifically?
So I had to understand the objective of the show, and step one, research as much as possible the content that could possibly fit into the show, and then come on a kind of weekly basis and suggest what I've come up with. Because it was BBC Education, it was very historical.
Right.
So it involved me spending days at the British Library and at that time I literally used to sit at the British Library and take out kind of old magazines and old books and actually research and find relevant information that could fit into the show. And you would take
notes, I'm assuming,
Yeah,
right?
I still take notes, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything handwritten, and I'd go back and say, this is what I found, and this is who we should feature, and this is, who we should talk to, and put those suggestions forward. And then, obviously it was quite, I was only 18 at the time. As an 18-year-old, getting that validation from a producer saying, oh, that's a great idea, let's follow up on that, let's see how we can include this,
right, was
epic, and for me, I was very fortunate, and it's really affected my viewpoints today on the education system, that I was at university at the same time, because I learned so much more from that experience than I did at university. Even simple things like the technology that was used and the cameras that were used. I'd go back to my 2 days at uni and we were still kind of a generation behind. We were still using older cameras. And I remember sitting there thinking, well, what's the point? What's the point in learning on equipment that isn't even being used in the industry right now? And so that's really tainted my view. And till now, I really, and this is going to, well, it is what it is. I really don't value someone's degree. So if anyone ever wants to work in our industry or work with us, it's always about, the real practical life experience, the experience on the job. If necessary, can they prove it? Like, show me an edit that you've done. Can I set you a task to do versus here's the degree I came out with? Because that just happened to be my experience.
You know what's really interesting, Reem, is that it's the same for being in the kitchen. It's the same for being in the kitchen. It's great to have a degree, but we want to know if you can handle the pressure.
Exactly.
So when we ask you to make a loaf of bread, simple, by the way, to make a loaf of bread, and you're like, I don't know. Well, thank you very much. But yeah. I completely agree with you. We've had lots of conversations here that, again, about the education system should be 4 days a week in the kitchens, 1 day a week doing your theory.
Yep.
So I completely agree. So then after the researcher, what did you do? Did you stay within the BBC or did you go somewhere else?
I was very fortunate that I stayed within the BBC for a couple of years. I do believe there's value in learning from different environments. So I continued to intern and be a runner. Runner is like the lowest rung in our kind of ecosystem in the pyramid. So runner, they called a runner because that's literally what you do.
Oh my God.
They give you a task and you have to run off and do it. So I did that for a while. I say a while, almost a year, with places like the Disney Channel, with London Studios in the UK, which does a lot of big formats like the Graham Norton Show and CDUK and all those popular shows on TV. So I learned a lot from that experience. And then there was I had a little brief pause in the middle, which is a kind of a personal pause, but I had a massive argument with my mom, where I basically, I'm a Libyan growing up in the UK. It's fair to say there were a lot of cultural challenges in that. And I remember it so clearly because I remember telling my mom, I can't live with you anymore. And she's like, you can't live with me, go to Libya. And I was like, I will. So in the heat of the moment and stubbornness, I was like, I'm going to go to Libya. I'm just going to go, and I packed my bag and what am I going to do in Libya? And so I did have a brief, I ended up there for 5 months teaching English. So that was, a fascinating experience. And I'm really, really glad I did it, actually. I'm really glad because I think I learned so much more about the country that I come from and got, much closer with relatives and family in Libya. But yeah, it lasted 5 months. And then after the 5 months, I was so ready to run back and get back into the media world.
So tell me about then, how did you actually come over to Dubai?
Oh, well, interesting. So I think you've probably picked up a little bit about my personality, which is, I see something, I focus on it and I go. And I actually came to Dubai on holiday and it was meant to be a 1 week holiday. And I got here and I was like, there's a whole media city. There's a city dedicated to media. I need to check this out. So I went to Media City, and at that time they used to sell these physical guidebooks.
Right.
And I bought a guidebook and I sat in a coffee shop and I contacted every production company in the guidebook. And I was like, I'm here on holiday, but I'd love to stay and I'd love to meet and I'd love to see what's possible. And I ended up with 5 interviews in that week. And I ended up with 3 offers and I signed a contract.
Wow.
Yep.
So who did you sign it with?
I signed actually with a production company in Media City. It was a very brief spell, but what it did do was it introduced me to Dubai One. And so within my first 3 months in Dubai, I was now hired as the 2nd employee at Dubai One. And I was now producing, writing, directing the first English language show in Dubai. And Poonam, who's the presenter of the show's called Out and About, is still a close friend and someone I work with today.
Because, that's huge. So if we put it into context, that's the first English-speaking television show. Mm-hmm. So did you have to start completely from scratch, as in the crew, cameras, runners, sound guys, all of this? How did you go about setting that up?
So it's a funny story because it was almost like a leap of faith that the channel was taking as well, because prior to that they were Channel 33 and there was a lot of acquired programming. So this was the first time the channel was producing a show, and there was a lot of faith and trust just put on me, and I was new to Dubai as well, and so was Poonam. Actually, we both literally landed in the country and in the city within a couple of months of each other, and so we were figuring things out. We didn't know where to go. Time Out was our godsend. We'd open up Time Out and go, oh, we should go there, we should do this.
Okay.
And crew wise, we just kind of met. We were very fortunate to meet a couple of great freelance team members, and they just right from the start, like, this is the project we're going to be working on, and we loved it. To be honest, it's because we enjoyed it, and when you enjoy something, you do everything you can to make it work. So our hours were crazy. We would spend a week. We'd spend a week filming 2 episodes. So in that week, we would be, and if anyone remembers Out and About, it was the kind of the show where you'd go skydiving and then you'd go horse riding and then you'd go parachuting. And, we were literally out and about showcasing what's available in the city. So we'd spend, a whole week just going back to back filming all these activities. And then the following week, we would edit 2 episodes whilst planning what we would do the following week.
Wow.
Right. So, and editing 2 episodes meant, so we'd often working through the night, but it was almost that adrenaline that kept you going, and it was such an amazing opportunity being new to Dubai and almost exploring the city through the show. And I guess when you're creating a show as well, it's got that show has so much of me and Poonam because we spent so much time together. So it'd be these moments where you'd get to a location like, and we're so lucky we got on, because it was literally, we're so lucky we got on. We'd get to someone like, do you think that's really funny? That's really funny. Let's do that. And it was just a lot of it was improv. A lot of it was off the cuff. A lot of it was our personalities are in that show, because we were kind of figuring it out as we go along. And thankfully, audiences really liked it. And that show ended up on air for about 8 years. But something interesting, which I guess people don't always, I want to just touch on, is that it didn't do well the first time it ran. So it ran on Dubai One, the whole season ran. And because it was the first show and it's been, it didn't have the traction that it should have got. And it only got the traction when it got repeated. So the whole show got repeated over summer. And suddenly people now discovered the show and started watching it. And then they subtitled it and put it on Dubai TV. And now it had a whole Arabic audience to it. And I just wanted to share that because people's memory of the show is like, oh, it was amazing, it was great. But you know what? That very first season, it had to be aired a second time and aired on an Arabic channel before people caught on and realized the potential. And by season 2, we had sponsors and it was really flourishing.
So I want to touch upon a few things there. First of all, if we backtrack to the interview, how did they approach you to say, listen, Reem, we want to have an English-speaking show? How was that interview?
So it wasn't an interview, it was a trial. So we had to do a pilot, and I was competing with another team, and Poonam had to do 2 pilots. So she did one with us and one with the second team. And I think they were just really happy with the end product. And I remember them giving me a call saying, great news, we love the pilot, we'd love you to work on this show. And it just so happened that things had ended with the actual company I came out here with. And I said, well, I'm available. And they said, great, can you come into the office tomorrow? I said, I'll be there. And it was that quick.
That's so quick.
Yeah.
So then how many episodes was the first season?
It was short. The first one was 13.
So within those 13 episodes, how long does it take to film and then edit one episode?
So literally what I just shared. So we would film, and it was a half-hour show. So
Right.
A half-hour show on air is roughly 22, 24 minutes of actual content. And it's roughly two and a half days of filming. And it's roughly 2 days of editing. So in a week, you could churn out 1 episode, but we were doing them 2 at a time. So we were doing a week of filming and then a week of editing.
So in terms of hours, how many hours was a half an hour edit, actual man hours?
I would say, 50, 60 hours. Like it was a full-time job just for that 1 episode.
And how many crew did you have out and about with you?
Well, it's funny you should say that. And I actually am really glad you touched on that, because there's me, Poonam, cameraman, sound man, assistant, and an editor. And that was it. And eventually we got an intern to help us, and then we got a production manager, and that's it. And I think it's quite important, because there are people out there who are like, oh, I need a big team, I can't do this. I'm like, literally, from a content perspective, from pulling it all together, they were like, 3 of us. So it is, and this was a show that, was pretty big. It was on prime time. So it is possible. It's not a numbers game. And I find it really interesting, because as my journey evolved and I started to produce and become an executive producer on multiple shows, the teams grew as well. And when the teams grow, you start to get comfortable, and you start doing a tiny piece of the puzzle. Right. And I'm like, well, actually, and when you take a piece away, they're like, oh, how are we going to do this? I'm like, you can do it. You can do it with 2 people. You can do it with 3 people. It's a mindset. It's being organized, and it's being passionate for it.
So then tell me about TI22. So you did Out and About for how many seasons?
Well, actually, Out and About was on air for 8, but I left the TV station after 4 years. Right. In my time at the TV station, I then became an executive producer, and I had multiple other shows. So Out and About was one, but then I had a sports show. Not that I know anything about sports, so that was fascinating. A sports show, a finance show, a health show. So I had about 7-8 shows at one point. And my last year at the station, I was head of events, which meant things like, the Dubai Film Festival at the time, the opening of Burj Khalifa. So a lot of these massive events I was responsible for the TV coverage of. And it just got to a point where I was tired. Like, if I'm honest about it, like, the TV world is relentless. You're working long hours. You're often working very unsociable hours, because guess when the best time is to film? Sunrise. So you're up at like ridiculous hours to go and shoot. And then also balancing multiple shows meant I was doing things, and I'm a very involved person. So I'm not usually, you'll have other executive producers who don't necessarily go to the studio and go to the, shoots and check on how things are going. I'm not that person by nature. I'm quite involved. So, which has its pluses and minuses. So I just was tired. So I just got to a point where I was like, and it was an epiphany moment. And when people say they heard a voice, and it always sounds like, yeah, but I actually feel like I heard a voice. I feel like I was so exhausted. There were a couple of challenges at the time. And I remember hearing a voice saying, just quit. And I was just like, I could just quit. And I walked in the next morning and quit. And everyone thought I was crazy, because for where I was in my career and my time in Dubai, I was second to the CEO. I was literally reporting directly to her and working on some massive projects. And I didn't have a plan either. So everyone was like, what are you going to do? Like, I don't know. But I just know I can't continue this. So part of it was exhaustion, but part of it was also, I'm a very organized person, and I'd let a couple of things slip. And I remember it very clearly, because I remember my dad calling me and saying, what time are we picking you up from the airport? I was like, oh my God, I'm not coming. I haven't told you. I've moved my ticket. I'm so sorry. I'm doing the air show and I've just totally forgotten. I'm going to come next month. I'm coming next month. Okay. And then the next month, I still can't believe it happened. But the next month, I had the identical phone call where my dad said, what time are we picking you up from the airport? I was like, I can't believe I've done it again. But I'm now doing the film festival and I can't come. And when you start to realize that you've lost track of who you are and, just having a life. My life is my work. And it just felt like it was a time for me to stop, even though I didn't actually know what I was going to do next.
So how long did you sort of have a hiatus for?
Not long. So not long at all. So again, obsessiveness kicked in, and I remember that as well. I remember, my last day at Dubai One, and someone just mentioned that Mission Impossible were filming in Dubai soon. And that was like obsession. That was like obsession all over again. I was like, I have to get on this movie. I don't know what, I just have to get on it. And so literally, it was a Thursday, because our weekends were Friday, Saturday. So it was a Thursday. Friday, fixed my CV, rang around everyone I knew going, do you know anyone working at Mission Impossible? do you know anyone working on Mission Impossible? And eventually got through to a friend of mine who's like, actually, I know the production manager. She's coming to dinner tomorrow night. I'm like, I'm coming to dinner. So I went to dinner, and you know when you have one of those experiences, you're just waiting for the right moment. I'm sitting at dinner waiting for this moment. And eventually my friend goes, oh, Reem's just left her position at Dubai One. And I'm like, yep, so I'm available. And she said, well, you know, we've hired everybody. I'm like, no, I'll do anything. And I'm like, well, you know, we really have filled all the positions. I'm like, I am happy to do anything. She goes, well, we've got a position in transport. I'll do transport. And the following day had an interview, and the day after that started as a transport coordinator on Mission Impossible, which is even funnier because I know nothing about cars and I don't drive.
Oh my God.
So it was one of those moments where like, what on earth are you doing? But I'd do it again.
And how long was that gig for?
It was only 3 months.
Right.
They were only filming in Dubai for 3 months. Actually, they were filming for 3 weeks, so it was even shorter. But it was just one of those experiences where it was amazing for me to see. I'd never worked on a Hollywood movie before. It was a goal. And it gave me so much confidence because I sat there and I thought, I understand this industry quite well. I understand this world. But my world is like 40 people, 50 people. This world is 400, 500 people. So it's just a matter of scale.
Whoa.
But they literally do, you know, I'm looking at the processes and what they do and the logistics. I'm like, I could do this. So I came out of it feeling really confident that, yep, Hollywood movie is in my pipeline. It's coming. I want to add that it was also challenging from a different perspective because I went from being an executive producer managing all these shows to now managing people's cars. So psychologically, I had quite a few people going, oh, something gone wrong in your life? Oh, what's happened? Oh, you know, it was a lot of, and I was like, I'm doing this because I want to learn. And I truly believe that the only way you do that is by being willing to try and do anything. And if that means that for the next 3 months, I'm a transport coordinator because the experience I'm going to get out of this far exceeds whatever anyone else's opinion is. And I also remember my mum having this conversation with her, like, are you trying to tell me that you left your position as an executive at a government station to manage people's cars? And I was like, yes, Mum. And it's a massive Hollywood blockbuster, and I'll let you know how it goes. And it's one of those where I think if you are going to take those leaps, you need to also have the strength and confidence in what you're doing to just follow the path. And
to get rid of your ego at the same time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people would have just been, no, I'm an exec. But I think you must have learned a huge deal in such a short space of time.
Yeah.
On a Hollywood blockbuster. And it is iconic, that film. Especially for Dubai.
Huge. And I think also coming into that role with my experience, it's like you see things very differently. You know, you see like, why have they done it that way? Like, why haven't they done it this way? And you're kind of learning, but also, you know, just seeing how you could possibly navigate the same situation, you know, differently. So I'm so grateful for that 3-month stint, and also what it did for me personally, because, you know, I was now exposed to a whole new world, new people, and, you know, your original question was TI22, and I went from that experience to launching TI22 a couple of months later, and I think there are a couple of factors that played into that. One is that I was now in the freelance world, and I actually ended up freelancing on a corporate, which went really well. And the client came up to me and said, oh, you know, we'd got 2 more videos this year. We'd love you to do it. And I remember standing there going, I'd love to help you, but I can't. I don't have a trade license. You know, I'm not a company. It's a bit unethical. I'm a freelancer. You should probably talk to the company that hired me. Like I gave them every reason under the sun not to hire me. And I went home and I Googled how to set up a company in Dubai, and next day went in, filled out a form. A week later had a trade license. But I wouldn't have been in that position had I not taken that 3-month stint. And also that 3-month stint filled me with so much confidence that I was like, I could do this, you know? So that's really how TI22 was born. It's the opportunity, it was the people, the timing. And that was January 2011.
and still running to this very day.
Yeah, I mean, I should also add that because I love this industry, even when I was employed, I used to find opportunities to do projects on the side or see what I can do. And I had done an awareness campaign, for a breast cancer awareness campaign. And this was, a few years earlier. And just for the sake of it, I thought, I know we did a good job. I entered it into the New York Festival and it won. And it won 2 golds and 2 silvers.
Wow.
So because of that, I think that also... So now I was starting my company Jan 2011 as an award-winning producer, with these accolades. So I was it catapulted me quite well in terms of how to then keep growing as a company and attract new clients.
But I mean, the portfolio that you have done is huge. I mean... There's been so many projects that you've been involved in. I mean, the opening of Burj Khalifa, monstrous. And that wasn't your company, but you were essentially doing that. COP28, Expo for 6 months plus. I mean, that also, you must have seen the media landscape massively change within this region, but you are one of the people who are leading that. How does that feel?
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I love what I do. And I think I'm also very, very fortunate that I love learning. And I think that's a really key part to this because we're in an industry that evolves and changes all the time. So if I had stayed doing exactly what I was doing at the start, I'm not sure we'd still be in business. So I think if you're in media, you need to keep learning and you need to keep evolving. And I fortunately love learning. So I'm constantly at a seminar, at a convention. That's just the world I enjoy. So when I look at the business trajectory and when you say like leading or being at the forefront of it, it's because we've evolved. It's like when I started the company, we were very focused on, my experience was in the broadcast realm. It's not a very big broadcast ecosystem here. So had I stuck to that, we wouldn't have survived. But the experience I had in the UK was very corporate. So I knew that, okay, that's an area I could lean in on. So the first couple of years, we did a lot of corporates, a lot of high-end corporates, a couple of documentaries. But then again, the ecosystem changed again. Social media became really important, and now everyone wants cheap and cheerful and they want quantity over quality. So you have to evolve again. And then the way animation has evolved is like, well, let's do that. Let's move into animation. So people would look at it and say, you pivot and you change a lot. I don't see it as that. I see it as I'm understanding the industry that I'm in, and my industry evolves all the time. And the only way you survive is if you evolve with it, which is why even when COVID came, the whole thing changed all over again, because in COVID, no one wanted to film anything, so like, what do? You start teaching people, and then what I realized, and I had so much negative backlash during that time as well, because people were like, are you mad? You're teaching people how to do the thing that you're selling. It's like, why would they ever come to you if you've now taught them how to film their own videos? And actually it was something I remember. I'm a big Gary Vaynerchuk fan, and something he said, which was, if you're going out of business, rather be the person that puts yourself out of business. Right. So I'm like, I'm going to be that person. If it means we never produce a video again and all we ever do is teach and everyone's learning on their own anyway, I might as well be the person they learn from. So COVID was like the era of teaching versus filming or producing. And then coming out of that, we realized that was working. So now we still offer a lot of boot camps and workshops in different spaces. And that evolves every single time I come up with a new idea. And I'm like, we need to start teaching that. Right, let's do another boot camp. So it's an constant evolution, and the mega events, thankfully, the broadcast ecosystem Expo's to thank for that, because the fact that Dubai won the bid for Expo, I believe it was a contractual commitment that they had to have a daily show. And with my experience in broadcast and my relationship with the station, I was very fortunate that opportunity was outsourced to TI22. And that, I think, brought back the taste for broadcast here and has led to, obviously, the show we have on air now and other opportunities. But yeah, everything leads to the next thing. And it's just about constantly evolving and staying relevant as much as you can.
But I think it's quite an exceptional job that you do, because when I sort of come to think about the similarities between an executive producer on a show like DXB1 or Expo, and then an executive chef that is running multiple ventures, what I wanted to really ask you is, when you're specifically on somewhere like Expo or DXB today, and you have these very strong characters and personalities, like the presenters, for example, how do you then manage everybody? Because essentially that's your job. You are responsible for the entire show. How do you go about doing that? Because also, I don't believe people teach you how to manage people.
I think I'm really fortunate that before I stepped into an executive producer role or a CEO role, like most people, you work in great places and you work in terrible places. And it's, what you learn from those experiences and what you choose to take forward. And culture is a huge thing for me, massive. So anyone who knows me knows that I take it really seriously. Like from the interview, I tell people, which may sound unusual, but I tell people I have an incredibly low tolerance for negativity, like incredibly low.
Love that.
And so I'm just letting you know from now, if you are joining our company, that I'm not in denial. I know things go wrong in everybody's life. I get it. But when you come in here, this is a positive space, right? It's really important that everyone feels it's a positive space, maintains that positivity. It's not coming in. I'll allow it every now and then if someone really has something going, seriously wrong in their life. But for the most part, everyone knows we're in a happy space, so we dance every day, which I know sounds mad, but we actually dance in the office every day. It's like a thing. Because I'm a big Tony Robbins fan, and I learned that the fastest way to change your psychology is to change your physiology. If you go to one of his events, he has you jumping up and down throughout the event. And I came out of the first event I went to and I was like, this is genius. And I remember going back to the office and I'm like, guys, we are dancing every day, and someone's responsible for turning the music on and making sure we dance every day.
Love it.
So it's like those elements, I think when you take it so seriously, it attracts the right, I don't want to say the right, that's wrong, but it attracts a certain type of individual who is happy to coexist in that environment. And I think that goes for my presenters as well. So my presenters, I'm very, it's about maintaining a relationship with them. I know them very well. I do my best to have either one-on-one time with them or we have regular socials. And as a result, my relationships with all of them are quite long. I still work with the same presenters who I put on air 16, 17 years ago because there's a trust factor there and I understand them. So I think it's about knowing people and spending the time to understand what's important to them and doing what you can. If they feel supported, they will support you. And yes, you would usually think the presenter world is one with a lot of egos, but I think, at least in our world, anyone who does have an ego doesn't last long. So it's the ones who I continue to work with are the ones who are happy to coexist in this environment.
Because also, I think it's just, there's so many variables to having a show like yours. Everybody's got things going on the outside, of course, as we know. But actually, I love the fact that you encourage, I think the dancing is amazing. So I'm probably going to do that now in the kitchens. But I also love the fact that when you come into the space, it's a positive space. I think that's a really amazing thing to reinforce.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, obviously through social media, through COVID, all that sort of thing, a lot of people wanted to get into presenting. Now, if I go specifically into chefs, a lot of chefs had to do online presenting because you had to do a cook-along and that sort of thing. Some of the chefs were amazing. Some of the chefs got a bit camera shy. What would be sort of your tips for chefs who want to sort of present within the realms of television?
So whether you're a chef or not, I genuinely believe anyone can do this, and because I genuinely believe that, I think it's a formula. I think it's about embracing your knowledge. It's about the minute you're confident with the content that you're going to deliver, then everything else seems to fall away. So it's about preparation and knowing what you're going to say and what you want to communicate and adding value. So if you know that the content you're putting out there is going to be useful to someone, they're going to learn from it, then that's all you really need to focus on. I would say stop worrying about all the superficial elements around that. And I don't know if that's as relevant for chefs, but in terms of how you look, how you feel, it's those elements of, oh God, I haven't washed my hair today, but it's one of those where like, I looked at myself and I was like, oh God. And I was like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. These elements, for some people it will, but it's like, that's not why people are tuning in. They're tuning in to learn how to cook the recipe, or they're tuning in to understand more about, cooking in general, or whatever the subject matter is. So it's understanding that is the reason people are tuning in, and trying to eliminate and stop thinking about all the personal self-sabotage, thoughts that you have. I'd also say all of us have people in our lives who maybe have opinions or thoughts that don't support what you're trying to do, and it's about blocking them as much as possible, and if it means that you don't talk to them about certain things you're doing, don't talk to them. And if it means they happen to be your family, so be it. And I think that's a challenge for many, and I think I've just maybe got to a point where, whether it's myself or people we're supporting, it's like, look, what do you want to do? Are you adding value? Do you know what you have? Do you have the credibility? Do you have the gravitas? Do you have the knowledge? That's it. That's the checklist. And just focus on that. And the minute you focus on that, everything gets easier.
I think that's amazing advice, Reem. Thank you.
Yeah.
Really. But then if we go sort of into the nitty gritty of presenting, and what I want to sort of talk about is, I've noticed you have some chefs who are naturals when it comes to presenting on TV. You have 5.5 minutes to talk and present a dish at the same time. So you either get those people who are very talented, they can do the job, they've got the mic on, the producer's talking in their ear, you've got 2 minutes, you've got 3 minutes, or you've got the guys who are just head down. I want to talk about the guys who are head down and are sort of a bit afraid to sort of express themselves. How can we help them sort of open up a little bit? Because they know how to cook, they're amazing, they've been in Michelin-starred kitchens, all that kind of stuff. How can we help those people to sort of open up a little bit when it comes to whether it's a live cook-along, whether they're presenting on TV? How can we do that?
I think it's a combination of practice, and they need to enjoy it. So the example you've just described doesn't sound like someone who's enjoying the process, because they're like focused on what they need to do, which is the cooking, and they're like, why do I even need to do this piece of the puzzle, right? And I think part of that is also the awareness and the realization that that piece of the puzzle is as much part of your job as the cooking.
Right.
And I think that many people underestimate the importance and the value of the visibility piece, right? Because things have changed. We're in an era right now where, and I say this all the time because I believe it, if you're not visible, you're invisible. We're in an era where you need to make that extra effort to communicate, to be a bit of a personality, to explain what you're doing. And if you're not that person, you may not be around for as long as the one who is. And if they start to realize that this is now essential, this is not, we'd like you to do this, this is now part of your role. Part of your role is you're a chef, but you know what? You need to be able to enroll people. You need to be able to teach people. You need to be able to have some form of social stand or personality in order to keep growing as a chef. So in order for you to keep getting new opportunities, in order for your restaurant to get the attention that you want it to have. I think long gone are the days of you do what you need to do in the kitchen and there's a PR company that will do everything that the restaurant needs to get the visibility. People are coming for you. And people also connect with people more than they do anything else. Whether you're a chef, whether you're a lawyer, it doesn't matter who you are, people connect with people. And I think they have to start understanding that it's about them as much as it is about the food.
So earlier on, you were talking about workshops and learning. You now run this incredible workshop on air. I want to talk about it in detail because I think it's amazing that you have this opportunity to spend time with people like yourselves, people who have been in the industry for some time like Poonam. Why did you decide to do that and carry on?
So I mentioned earlier about evolving and always just looking at where the need is. And I really felt there was a need because, I'm fairly active on social media. And if I'm honest, like a big piece of my social media presence is business development. Like I know that I get leads and inquiries the more frequently I post. So coming back to the chefs, the more they post and the more they're out there, they'll see the inbound result of that as well. And what consistently was happening was people, and it still happens, I get messages almost on a daily basis of someone with an idea for a TV show or someone who wants to be a presenter or wants to be cast on a show on air. So I'm sitting there looking at my inbox and I'm like, there are all these people who want to be on TV. Do they even know what that means? Do they even have the experience? I mean, it's one thing to want to do it. It's another for you to be able to do it tomorrow. So, and yes, we are in an ecosystem that doesn't have as many opportunities, but I am also a very big believer that luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So why not get prepared? So it became one of those situations where I've got all these people messaging me, and many of them, have the potential. They have either a great idea, or they are a strong personality, or they've done a good job with their social media profile, but this is maybe just the missing piece of the puzzle in terms of how do they get in front of a camera confidently. And there are certain things we do in a TV studio that you will never experience unless you're in a TV studio, So where are they meant to get that experience? Where are they meant to have a conversation and have a producer speak in their ear and try and pull that off coherently? That's not a normal experience. So that's really where it came from. I thought, let me experiment. It started off as an experiment. Let me see if I put this together, is there enough interest, out there to run a boot camp? And I remember the first couple of posts I put out were very speculative. It was very, I'm thinking about doing this. I'd love to find out, if you're interested, and if so, what you'd want to learn. Just that one post. And I had a bunch of people messaging me going, when is it? How much is it? Where is it?
Wow.
And I think that's another lesson. I think, we're also in an age where you don't have to run with an idea. You can test it first. So I didn't go off and develop the boot camp. I put a post up. I put a post up and I got that response. And I was like, okay, there's interest in this. Now it's worth me figuring out what I can develop that will add as much value. My next post was like, for all of you who, were interested, what would you like to learn, right? So I have an idea of what I'd want to teach, but I think it's also important to understand, like, what do people actually want to learn? So I had a bunch of people respond. I'm like, okay, I'm on the right track. So let's now develop this. So I'm a very responsive person. So it's very much like, let's see where the need is. What do people want? Now can we create it? And that's really how On Air 1 was created. It was an experiment. And I had 20 people in the room. And I was
Wow.
like, I was, from a value perspective, it's not a low investment, but we have a lot of overheads associated with being in a studio and all of that. So I was even wary about that. I was thinking, this isn't like the 200 dirham, 300 dirham, this is a $2,000. It's a very different price point. But equally, I can't do it for less because of, what's involved. But people still paid and people still signed up, So I'm like, okay, there is a need here. Then you get into the whole other part of this equation of like, you need to do a good job, so that you end up with people who recommend you, refer you, and want to come back for more. And I'm just so thankful and grateful that, the first one went well. And then we've ended up doing a number of editions of that boot camp. But that now we've evolved again, because now I'm sitting here going, I've got all these people who've done On Air. What's next? They're all sitting there thinking, what do I do with all of this knowledge? But it's almost not enough knowledge. So, which is why just this past weekend was On Air 2. And I followed the exact same principle of asking all of them, what do they want to do next? And thankfully, because I think we're now in a space where people have received a lot of value. And we had people sign up without even knowing what I was going to teach. Because it's got to, and I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful that we're in that position. So, and so even now I'm about to launch something else, because I've realized that I'm about to launch a membership, which I haven't fully thought through, but I just know it's needed. It's like, I know that all these people who've come out of these workshops, they have this amazing 2-day experience, 3-day experience, and they're all at a high. And then what do they do with that knowledge? Right. So, and I think because I learn so much and I enroll to so many masterminds and workshops everywhere, I know kind of what works and what doesn't work. And the ones that work are the ones that have some form of accountability or some form of, right, I'm checking in on you every month and we're going to do this so that no one's left behind. And by the end of the month, we've all done this. And so that's kind of what I'm working on now, which I'm calling Mission Visible, because I really think at the end of the day, it's not actually about TV. At the end of the day, it's everybody wanting to up their visibility in different ways. And so, so that's my latest evolution, which you'll be hearing about very soon.
Sounds amazing.
Thanks.
No, really. Because also you must have this sort of data bank of incredible talents. And because you're so well connected within the TV landscape, and not just within this region, but obviously, of course, previous BBC, so on and so forth, you must also be able to connect some of these personalities to some quite big ventures.
I try, but in all honesty, the ecosystem isn't what it needs to be, which is very frustrating. It's very frustrating because I know that I can see the potential in someone. I know it's a good idea. I know it can work, but I'm not a broadcaster at the end of the day. So someone needs to take a leap of faith in producing this show or funding the show. And that doesn't always work. You don't always manage to get all the stars to align. So there are some people who, they should be on TV. And there's only so much I can do in terms of getting them that opportunity or getting them in front of the right place, which is why, I'm doing my best now to see what can I do? How do I take this into my hands? How do I maybe, now that I've have this whole pool of people, go out there and see if, maybe if they're backed by me, can we get this to the next level? So it is a frustrating scenario, but it's also one which I recently went to Cannes, and it was very fascinating because I went to MIP TV, which is a TV conference, and all anyone ever spoke about was YouTube. And the fact that broadcasters aren't taking all the risks that they should be taking. They want to be in a safe space, so therefore they keep renewing old shows versus taking a leap of faith on a new show. And one of the core messages was, nowadays, produce the show you want to produce on YouTube, and the broadcaster potentially pick it up from YouTube, which is something I said 10 years ago. But anyway, I'm trying to get over that. So even now on our bootcamp, on our TV bootcamp, I was very transparent with everyone. I said, I know you've all signed up for a TV bootcamp. The reality is I've just come back from a TV convention, where everyone is talking about the importance of being visible on YouTube. So you know what? Let's focus on YouTube for a little bit, because you may think that that's your route. You may think I'm going to bang on the door of broadcasters, but if they're not opening the door, you need to create your own door. And it looks like nowadays that's the way to do it. It's partnering and getting the visibility on your own and hopefully attracting the interest of a broadcaster if you still need it.
Well, look, talking about knocking your own door. So then if we go down again the route of television and cooking, you have famous shows like MasterChef, The Bear, Somebody Feed Phil. That was also just recently, in Dubai, and it's now on Netflix, which is amazing for Dubai and for the food scene. If I wanted to pitch to you, what would be your advice? What's the best way to come to you and say, Reem, I really believe in this idea, specifically cooking-wise. Here you are. How does that process work for somebody who would be interested?
I think that's a great question. I'm going to come to that, but I just want to comment on the examples that you just gave, because I also just recently discovered my Idiot Sandwich.
Yes. Right,
which is just on YouTube with Gordon Ramsay, which is fully funded by a cookware brand. I've forgotten the name of the brand. And I actually think that is the model forward. The fact is, it's got nothing to do with the broadcaster. You've met obviously it has Gordon Ramsay attached, which is a big plus, but it's fully funded by a brand. So I think coming to the point of how do you pitch your idea and get it. I have so many people pitching ideas all day long, which is great. But then the reality is the funds need to be there for this idea to materialize. And as much as people think I can help them, I'm not a bank, so it's like we have to get funding partners to do this. So I would say in order for it to work, you need to have a strong idea. When I say a strong idea, What's the hook? What's the angle here? Why am I going to watch? Why am I going to care? So anyone who comes up to me, I'm like, why do I care? That's a daily question in our office for everything.
Love it.
For everything. And I like, even for guests on the show, they're like, oh, we really want to put this guest on. Why? Why do I care? Why will our audience care? Why do you care? Give me a legitimate reason, why we should put this person on the show right now. Right? And sometimes, I stump people and find someone else.
Do your research.
Find someone else, because you have to, at the end of the day, I want people to watch because they're taking something away that they couldn't get somewhere else, or it's new information for them. You don't want to just keep recycling the same thing that's out there. So coming back to, pitching an idea, why do I care? What's new about this idea? What's different about it? What isn't out there already? Like, what is that USP? What is that star factor that's like, okay, this is a really strong reason for us to move forward with this idea, especially in the food space. There's so much out there already, so what's going to make your show stand out or make it different? I think that's number one. And then number two is really, how can brands be part of this show? Because brands are the ones who are going to end up funding it. So I think if you've got that plan in place, then it's like, okay, I can see how we can financially make this viable, that we can now go off and see how to produce it. But if I only get one piece of the puzzle, if I only get, oh, this is an amazing idea, and there's no kind of, this is how brands can be part of it, it's going to stop at being an amazing idea. And there are so many amazing ideas out there, but ultimately you need the funding for it to go anywhere.
Okay. So I've just gone down several different tangents, because I think that's a really big thing to sort of discuss, is if then I go through the route of funding, what are the sort of fundamentals that if I wanted to have a small, let's say, show on food is memories, okay, which is what this show is about, okay? And there's 3 segments to the show. We chat about childhood food memories. We then go for a walk somewhere to talk about what you did. And then we make that childhood food memory at the end. That's the segment. And I'm talking, let's say, 20 minutes per show. And let's say it's on YouTube. Mm-hmm. How would I then go to not to yourself, I want to go to a brand to pitch that specific idea?
I think you need to do your homework, and I think you need to figure out which brands are going to be most aligned with this idea, and which brands, and maybe not the whole show, but which brand, maybe there's a brand out there that's super focused on bringing your memories to life, right? And that's their tagline, and that's their pitch, and that's maybe their photographic brand or whatever they may be, and then you pitch them that segment, right? And maybe there's a brand out there that's, maybe focused on wanting to showcase their kitchen and wanting to focus, on their actual physical space. And you just pitch them the cooking segment. Possibly. All I'm trying to say is you want to find where your idea aligns with the objectives of a brand, so it becomes a shoe-in. Right. So you're not out there trying to pitch an idea again, to someone who doesn't care. You want to see, what does this brand care about, and how do I put that into my show in some way so it now feels like a fit.
Got you. See, that's brilliant, because I love the fact that you're saying it needs to align to the values of the show, because there's no good me going to Nike.
No good at all. And you see that all the time. And I've made that mistake as well. I've made that mistake because, back in 2014, exactly 10 years ago, but anyway, I got very serious about the YouTube space. And that's when we launched Dubai On Demand with this exact mission.
Right.
The original mission of Dubai On Demand was that we were going to create YouTube shows, niche YouTube shows, and get brands kind of partnering. And it became very difficult because after a while, I was funding it and personally and producing all this content, and we were out there trying to get brands involved. And eventually you get to a point where a few brands say yes and you go, we're doing it, right? And I remember it so clearly. I remember we did a CrossFit show. And we happened to have one of our presenters at the time who was obsessed with CrossFit. I'm like, great, love it, niche, And I think that's another key area. It's look at what your niche is, because there's a higher chance of you getting your content developed if you're in a niche. So even coming back to cooking, instead of doing everything, I always talk about Chef Sven. I'm not sure if you must be familiar with Chef Sven. Mm-hmm. I love him because he's so eccentric, he's German, and he's obsessed with bread. So he's not trying to be a chef, on across all ingredients and all recipes and all meals. Is like, I'm a specialist in bread. And because he's a specialist in bread, like even the way his show was branded when we were working with him, we called it The Truth About Bread. And we literally, I know way too much about bread now, but it's one of those things where it stood out because it's a niche, right? So I think it's coming back to what is that niche that you want to focus on, and just really, really nailing that, and then nailing which brands are aligned with that. And coming back, sorry, I've just lost my trail of thought, but coming back to the CrossFit show, at the time, we were talking to 2 brands at the same time. And one understood the value of building a CrossFit community. And they didn't actually require much branding in the content. So we were filming, their CrossFit classes, and we were filming with all the individuals. You could tell which brand it was because we were in their facility. But beyond that, that was about as far as it went. The other brands literally wanted their brand all over it, so they wanted their brand mentioned, their brand logo, their brand. So it started to feel like a corporate,
right.
And it just felt so fake in many ways. Like, this is no longer an authentic piece of content because we're now selling the CrossFit brand, right? And I think that's a key differentiator, is that sometimes, even though it aligns, how far are you allowing the brand to integrate with the content that you're creating? Because at the end of the day, it has to work for the viewer. And if the viewer feels like they're being sold to, then you've already lost them. So it's a fine balance, but it's finding the brand that aligns and ensuring they understand the bigger picture, that this is about awareness, and awareness takes time. It's not an ROI that's going to happen tomorrow. It's about, we're going to keep this going for a significant period of time till people know exactly who you are and want to be part of it voluntarily, which is actually a much bigger impact that you can have.
Well, the last sort of question I wanted to ask you, Reem, before we get into the quick fire questions, is, for you, why do you think it's important to have great camera presence? Now, I'm not talking about just television. I'm also talking about whether you're filming yourself on your phone, whether you're doing cooking videos, chef videos, presenting videos, doesn't matter if you're a chef. Just generally, why right this second now is it important to be confident in front of the camera?
I am so passionate about this topic because I think there are a world of people who don't do it and really should. And nowadays, it's as high as 66% of people who are more likely to do business with you if they've watched a video of you. 66%.
That's astonishing.
It's huge. And the reason is because they've built trust with you. It's a way of them seeing you, building trust, building your credibility. And think about it. And some industries more than others. So if you're in an industry that involves sharing confidential information, so let's say lawyers, doctors, they're number one because people are more likely to watch all of those videos before reaching out to you. I'm now in a situation which I find hilarious. I'm grateful for it, well, although I find it hilarious, where like people come up to me and go, oh, I really love your content and I really had an impact in this. And I'm like, I grew up in a world where that only happened to celebrities. That only happened to like actors and famous people. And we're now in an era where it's in your own control. And so you are impacting people on a daily basis, whether you realize it or not. So I think part of it is actually your own confidence, like realizing you have value, you have a message, and there are people who want to learn from you. Part of it is you never know who you're impacting with that message. And the other part is on a business development front, is I genuinely get new leads and opportunities because I'm out there. And I really believe that. I really believe that if you're not out there, and that's why I keep saying it, if you're not visible, you're invisible. And you'll find that people who are just more visible than you are the ones who are attracting the opportunities. That's what it comes down to. So if you plan on attracting more opportunities, the visibility is key right now.
And it doesn't matter what field you're in.
Doesn't matter what field you're in. And I feel really confident in talking about this because I understand you. When I say I understand you, I used to be you. About 7, 8 years ago, you wouldn't find a video of me anywhere. And I was so comfortable behind the camera. I'm in an industry where I'm literally behind the camera. And I felt really uncomfortable whenever I went in front of it. And I just thought, this isn't the place for me. Like, what have I got to share? That's not why people are tuning in. And it took time. And COVID catapulted that for me in terms of realizing that actually people do want to hear what you have to say. You have a specific audience that you are helping, and you're not for everybody, and that's fine, which is something else I learned, which is that generally speaking, 30% of the people out there will love you, 30% of the people out there will hate you, and 30% are indifferent or they're neutral. And the minute I learned that, I felt liberated, because now I'm like, it's okay if you hate me. That's fine. You're just in that 30%. It's fine. It's okay if you're indifferent. You're there. I'm speaking to the 30% who love me. I'm providing them value, and I don't want to let them down. So it's about catering to your audience and ignoring everyone and everything else, and realizing you don't like everyone either. If you're honest about it, you don't, right? There are people out there I don't like, and that's okay. And I was telling this to someone recently, and he turned around and he went, "Yeah, actually, I met one who doesn't like you." And I was like, "It happens, and it's fine." The minute you come to terms with that, you realize I'm not doing this for everybody. I'm doing it for this subset of people, and that's all you need to focus on.
I love that, because you're right. You're catering to your specific niche,
yeah.
And I think that's amazing. Really, because it opens your eyes to a lot of things, and it's having that sort of confidence.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that the first ever podcast I did, so I studied music also as I was becoming a chef, so I knew about mics and stuff like that. And so the podcast was born, of course, during COVID. And when I listened to my very first podcast compared to now, I cringe. The worst part, Reem, it's the one which is the most downloaded to this day, still.
But that's going to be because it was the first, so there's a timeline there. But second is everyone always loves your first more than anything else, because that's when you have the support of all of your friends, family, everyone under the sun going, "Mabruk, congratulations, well done." And I think it's having the persistence and consistency to keep going beyond that point is what's important. So it doesn't surprise me that that's got the highest. But something I'm going to say, which most people don't say, is I never watch anything again. So I am unlikely to even watch this podcast, because the way I see it is that I don't need to go down that self-criticism, and I don't need to. I need to be confident enough that I've shared something in this discussion that is going to be valuable for someone, and that's enough. And I think if you get into that space of focus on sharing as much value as you can in the moment, and stop overanalyzing and critiquing what you've done in the past. There's nothing you can do about it now. It's gone, and just focus on how you can add more value the next time. And that's truly what I think you need to do, especially if you're someone who has to overcome nerves, self-consciousness, discomfort in front of a camera. Part of it comes when you start hearing yourself and seeing yourself, "Oh, I should have done it this way. Oh, I should have done it that way. Oh, I should..." Get over it. Nothing you can do about it. Do it differently next time.
Love it. Now, we've come to the quick fire questions.
Right.
Specifically designed for you. First things first. What's your favorite ingredient?
Oh, my favorite ingredient. It's tricky. I don't cook anything, so I like spice, chili.
Done. Now, I put this, but I didn't know beforehand. So pickled or spicy?
Spicy.
Of course. Fish and chips or shawarma?
Oh, shawarma. But not with the chips in the shawarma. It's not meant to happen that way. So,
some people would argue, Reem. Some people would argue.
No
saying.
argument. No.
Right now, in this present moment, what are your top 3 most favorite cuisines to eat?
Favorite cuisines to eat. So Libyan, because I don't actually eat it that often, and that's what I remember from my childhood. So when it does happen, that's what I would go for. I have so many Indian friends. I do love Indian cuisine, and I do love Italian as well.
Okay. Who would you say are your sort of top 3 culinary heroes, but they don't necessarily need to be chefs?
Oh, top 3 culinary heroes. So, I've done quite a bit of work with Chef Vinit. I am a very big fan, actually, because I think not even because of the cooking, although the cooking I think is very good. It's because of how humble he is and his personality, and because, you know, we meet so many famous people, and as a Michelin star chef, and for him to be so gracious and down to earth. So he's a big one for me.
Legend.
Culinary space. I talk about her often, Arva from Frying Pan Adventures, because I think she's so passionate about what she does and the food tours that she runs. And I think she gives people an experience that maybe they wouldn't have had before, and introduces them to flavors and eateries. And even for the eateries, you know, they get exposure that they probably would never have had before.
Huge exposure.
Yeah, so I think that's a big one. And I think a third is Anthony Bourdain, just from his style. And that's, I'm looking at it more from a content perspective. I think when you watch his shows, it was a very real, authentic journey. And I think, you know, that's a great presenting style for a food show.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, from all of your years and experience in the media realm, normally I would ask the funniest ever kitchen or restaurant incident. However, for you, I'm going to ask, what's been your funniest ever TV or media incident that you've seen or been involved in?
She's not going to be very happy that I shared this, but I'm going to take the risk. And it was funny because of how real it was. And, you know, in the world of TV, especially live TV, anything can happen. Right. And I think as most people know, I do take risks on new presenters because I do believe anyone can do this. It's a matter of training. And during Expo, one of those presenters was the outstanding Katie Overy. She's a brilliant personality, people person, very bubbly, and so she was just the right personality to have at Expo on the ground. So she was out there, you know, reporting, chatting to people. You'd throw to Katie and she'd be in the middle of mayhem and go, I'm right here with so and so, and have a chat and have a laugh, and she's great. And this particular episode, we were doing a quiz, and she was standing there and she had like 2 contestants, and we have a timer on the screen, you know, counting down 30 seconds. And she's literally getting them to answer these questions, and the timer's ticking, and she's got the producer in her ear, and the producer's counting down and going like 5, 4, 3, and she's still waiting there, and she hits 0, and Katie's still in the middle of this quiz. And so the producer's like, time's up, time's up, time's up. And Katie, in that moment of panic, actually looked straight at the camera and went, I know. and then went back. And I remember all of us standing in the gallery just staring at her going, who's she talking to? Who's she talking to? Is she talking at you? Who does she think she's talking to? And it was just that moment of like, she clearly forgot in that instance. She's live on air, you know, and that she literally looked at the audience in the camera, responding to the person in her ear. And it was just hilarious and tragic at the same time, you know, but she continued with, you know, got the answer and then went back to you in the studio and was totally mortified. She was so mortified. And she came. We used to have a meeting at the end of every show, and she came up to me immediately afterwards, and she went, "I know," amusingly. And I was like, "Well, you're not going to do it again now, are you?" And it was just one of those moments that I remember just because of how amusing it was. But it's so real. It happens, right? And it's just learning how to overcome it and move on.
Well, I was going to say, like, it's also a very pressurized environment.
Yeah.
Because you've got 2 people who you don't necessarily know. You're trying to do a quiz. You've got the countdown. You've got this guy in your ear who's responsible for the timings. You need to obviously keep that bravado up. Not easy.
Yeah.
So I can't blame her.
No, not at all. And also, you know, this was her first stint at live TV. Like Expo was like, she was very much thrown into the deep end, and she was amazing. She did such an outstanding job. And I think everyone does need something to go wrong, you know, at some point. And the earlier it goes wrong in their journey, the better, so that they learn how to come back from it. And also, you know, they don't do it again.
100%.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to any budding presenter?
Persistence is key. And, you know, don't worry, like 20 people aren't going to like you, but it's finding the one that does and finding your niche. Because I think, you know, I meet so many people who are generalists, you know, so many people are like, oh, I can do this show and I can do that show and I can do this show. And I'm like, great. But, you know, I'm trying to cast for a car show. I'm trying to cast for a cooking show. Like, what do you want to be known for? So the question I always leave people with is, what do you want to be known for? Which isn't an easy question to answer. But when you know the answer to it, then you attract the right opportunity that fits with your personality. And sometimes you're not right for every opportunity. But when you know what you want to be known for, then you go for the right opportunity, then the two come together. So I think that's a key one. That, as well as the persistence, and just as much practice as possible. And when I say practice, go for opportunities wherever they may be. They may not pay as much as you want them to initially. Not just initially. We're not in a well-paid industry, to be honest. But be open to those opportunities, because it's only when you try that you actually get on-the-ground experience, and that's what counts. Sorry, a bonus fourth one is the visibility. Because I see people like, oh, I want to be a presenter, and I go on their social media profile and there's like nothing on it, and I'm like, well, if you need to show me what you can do, because nowadays people go to Instagram before anything else. Back in the day, you'd go to a website. Now, if you say, oh, you should check out this person, the first thing I'm going to do is go on their Instagram page. And if I can't see examples on their Instagram page of what they could potentially do or showcasing their personality, then I don't see how I'm going to take you forward to the next stage. I think that's a key one. The number of people have private accounts and want to be personalities. Have your private account for your family and for your personal stuff and for whatever else you're not comfortable sharing publicly. But remember, social media is now a business development tool. So look at your profile as a business development tool and start treating it that way, and put the content out there that's going to help you attract that opportunity.
What advice would you give to a 16-year-old Reem?
Oh, a 16-year-old me. That's a really good question. So I think I was very fortunate that from a young age, I had the drive and the persistence to keep going. And I was very, very focused on the next step in my career. I would say where I am today to where I was then is I feel more liberated in sharing who I am and my opinions. So I think I'm more me, or I'm more authentic to who I am. I think I was maybe too worried about what people thought. So I would say stop caring what people think in a positive way. But I mean, in a positive, as in, if you want to go out and try something, do it. The older I've got, the more confident and comfortable I've got with just trying new things, doing what I want to do, saying what I want to say without worrying about the impact that will have, because otherwise you're constantly living for someone else and you're not living for yourself.
Now, on socials, if people wanted to get hold of you, how can they reach out?
I'm pretty easy to get hold of because I'm on social quite a lot. So I think I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So from a professional capacity, people can always DM me on LinkedIn. But I'm on Instagram almost all the time too. And I do respond to anyone who DMs me. I would say if you're going to DM someone, whether it's me or anyone else, provide some context. Because, you get a lot of people going, hi, how are you? I'm like, okay,
I'm very well, thank you so much.
Thanks. How can I help? My response is always, how can I help you? So like, tell me, like, if you're reaching it, not just me, anybody, tell them why you've initiated this conversation so that I can help you, So I think that's key. But yeah, Instagram or LinkedIn are probably the easiest.
And can you give us a link to your website, please?
We've got so many websites because I actually believe in having different websites for different purposes. But I think the one that's probably the most popular right now is our on-air bootcamp, and I'll make sure that's shared with you in the links below.
Amazing. So, Reem, I want to just recap what we've discussed because it's been quite extensive. From your childhood memories in Libya, which is amazing, and the spice, the pasta, the carbs, to then knowing your path from an early age, I think is fantastic. Then going into the first sort of BBC building, Watchdog, having all of those experiences, to then coming out to Dubai for a week's holiday, which then extended somewhat.
17 years later, somewhat, yeah.
So then, of course, being on the set of Out and About, then on this phenomenal film for Dubai, Mission Impossible, to then TI22. It's been amazing what you're doing during COVID, the presenting, that sort of thing. Now, the message that I'm getting here for all of our viewers and our listeners is I'll just share a small story with you, which is what I believe you are really telling people. So in 2007, 2008, I filmed this amazing television show called Out of the Frying Pan in London. BBC Two, Raymond Blanc. It was very much an apprentice-style sort of setup. But the funny thing is that we were filming for around 2 to 3 months, and we were staying in this one building. And this building was basically also a television studio, but also it was the place where we would film, cook, so on and so forth. The name of the building was called Perseverance Works. And I believe that's exactly who you are. You know, you persevered all this time to just keep pushing forward, moving forward, and this is what you do. So I just want to say, on behalf of the ChefJKP podcast and myself, thank you very much for taking the time to be here, number one. Number two, thank you so much for inspiring so many people to be in front of camera, to be visible, to really be a better version of themselves. It's a really amazing message. So thank you so much for always inspiring us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. If I can just very quickly add, I neglected to mention anything related to building relationships, and that's been a core part of everything I've achieved and persevering. And I just wanted to touch on that as well, because I think that, you know, I've spent a lot of time getting to know people, building relationships here, networking here. And I do think that if you do that, then every time you're stuck in a moment, you need to start thinking not about how you're going to do it, but who can help you through it. And I think once you've got that mindset, then the perseverance becomes much easier. So on that note, I'm so glad I got to meet you and for this opportunity as well. So I really appreciate being here.
Thank you.